Welcome into the Simmons Scoop with Chad Simmons. Today's June 4th, and I'm your host, Josh Newberg. We got On 3 Director of Recruiting, Chad Simmons. He's here. We're going to get a lot of intel from him. It is a busy time of year. We're almost to commitment season, but right now it's official visit season. So we're going to break it all down. But before we get into it, guys, do me a favor. Hit subscribe to the On 3 Recruits channel. This is the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube, and we want you to be a part of it. So jump on board. Hit subscribe. All right. Let's bring in Director of Recruiting here at On 3, Chad Simmons. And I said it is official visit season, which means visits, it can change momentum of recruitments. We're going to cover 5 recruitments that have been changed due to official visits. Let's start with a 5-star. Linebacker Xavier Griffin. Now, when he decommitted from USC about 3 weeks ago, the consensus pretty much was that Alabama was the favorite. But this weekend, he took an official visit, and it wasn't to Tuscaloosa. So tell us about Xavier Griffin and where the momentum is in this recruitment.
Yeah, Josh, I mean, he was at Ohio State. We know Ohio State was in there, and they're always going to be a factor if they get a kid on campus. They're the reigning national champions, and they do a great job of player development, creating that brotherhood, that culture, and obviously getting Xavier up there based on what he said and other pieces of intel that we've put together. They really moved the needle over the weekend to become a major player. Like you said, Alabama, he's from there before moving to Georgia, has connections there to that state, that program. They're still very high on his list. He'll get back to Tuscaloosa this weekend. Texas, a key player in this. They'll get him on campus June 13th. But coming out of the weekend, Ohio State created a lot of buzz around Xavier Griffin.
Yeah, we'll see if the momentum changes from visit to visit or if Ohio State stays where they are. We'll have to watch that one. All right, let's move on to one of the top-rated uncommitted quarterbacks in the country, Bo Bentley. Grew up a fan of Oklahoma, but also considering LSU in this recruitment. He was in the Bayou down at LSU over the weekend. What are you hearing on this one?
Yeah, this one slowly kind of narrowed down to now 2 schools. Georgia was in there until they took Jared Curtis back and kind of ended their recruitment of quarterbacks. And now it's a showdown between LSU and Oklahoma. Like you said, grew up a fan of that program in Norman, Oklahoma, is very familiar with the Sooners. Now, they do have a quarterback commit, Jaden O'Neal. That's not really a factor for him or Oklahoma in this recruitment. He'll be back at Oklahoma this weekend, and that is big, even bigger now because of this past weekend in Baton Rouge. They did a great job earlier this spring getting him on campus and doing a great job with building that relationship, making him feel part of that culture in Baton Rouge. His time this weekend with Joe Sloan, the quarterback coach, is learning more about the personnel. And one thing I'm told that really intrigues him about LSU is the playmakers they put around their quarterbacks to make plays. So, look, LSU made a very big, significant move over the weekend. I'm hearing they are the front runner coming out of this visit. We'll see if Oklahoma can swing that momentum back their way here in a few days.
All right, let's move to the offensive line. We're top 150 overall prospect Leo Delaney coming off this Clemson visit. Who has the momentum?
Yeah, look, he was going in, we thought, pretty tight race between Michigan and Clemson. Penn State was in there as well. Tennessee's kind of faded throughout the spring. We thought Clemson versus Michigan, maybe an edge slightly to Michigan, but coming off this visit, Clemson gained all the momentum. I heard even when he was on campus still Saturday evening that Clemson was making a big move in this recruitment. By the time he left on Sunday, I spoke with him and people around him. It was clear Clemson became the front runner there. He's now come out and set a commitment date for June 4th, and we like where Clemson sits because of Dabo Swinney's culture and the O-line coach, Matt Luke.
All right, another recruitment that looks like it's trending is wide receiver Craig Dandridge. He was over at Georgia this weekend. Could he be the next to commit to the Dogs?
Yeah, he's definitely one to watch. I think from everything I've kind of put together the last few days coming off this trip to Georgia, 1, I like Georgia as the front runner. 2, he's probably going to take those OVs to like Georgia Tech, maybe Tennessee later on this month before he makes that decision. Could things change? of course, this is recruiting, but right now, one thing's clear. Georgia likes him, and he likes Georgia, and we like those two to kind of end up as a match as of right now when that decision is made. James Coley saw him in the spring. They like his playmaking ability, his speed, play after the catch, and then obviously him and his family had a great visit to Georgia, learn more about the academic side. It's less than an hour from home. A big one to watch this weekend is at Georgia Tech on the flats with Brent Key, but right now we like Georgia's position.
All right. Last one we got to hit on today is offensive lineman Brett Collier. Feels like we've been talking about him for 2 years already. The massive IMG offensive lineman. He's been taking visits over the last couple months, but this past weekend he was at Ohio State for an official visit. How did it go?
Went great. Probably couldn't have gone any better. His first time there to Columbus was this spring early, like about a month and a half ago. This time around, had family with him. Look, he's at IMG Academy, but he's from Colorado, has family all over the place. There's no really connection to anywhere specific that will lock him down. But look, we've always heard that Miami and Georgia were the two setting the pace in this recruitment. I mean, he's been to Oklahoma, USC, Colorado, numerous schools, Michigan, all over the place. But it's always come back to Miami versus Georgia as the two setting the pace. But now we want to include Ohio State in that group after this weekend. They did a great job. Tyler Bowen, new offensive line coach, did a great job connecting with Breck, his family, explaining his philosophy, how he coaches offensive linemen, his plan for development. Obviously, Ohio State has a great reputation of developing players, specifically offensive linemen as well. Sees a chance to play there in Columbus early and compete for playing time. So look, Ohio State inserted itself into this race as a major player for Brett Collier.
All right. Well, that's it for the momentous visits that took place in week 1 of June. Now, week 2, we got some more big visits. So, Chad, we'll talk next week about which visits move the momentum of some of these top recruitments. We got to talk some Clemson recruiting because the Tigers have the number 7 ranked class in America, and they just had their big June visit weekend. So there could be some more commitments coming. And Clemson's active in the state of Georgia. So we got Chad Simmons here. Talk a little about some of their top targets in the Peach State. And we got to start with 5-star linebacker Tyler Atkinson. Plays this thing very close to the vest, Chad. You've known Tyler Atkinson and his family for years now. He just took this trip to Clemson. Is Clemson maybe the dark horse in this recruitment?
Yeah, I don't know if you call them the dark horse. I mean, they are a true contender in this race. Look, we know about Tyler and his brand, his name, the weight that carries, the value he has as a recruit in the NIL world. That's been the biggest question about, can Clemson compete or will they compete in the NIL world, against some of the top programs that are out there, like whether it's Ohio State, Georgia, Oregon, Auburn, Texas, USC. I mean, other schools that are fighting for a guy like Tyler Atkinson. We know NIL will be a factor there and kind of what they do to set him up for success as far as his brand goes. But when it comes to those personal relationships, seeing a fit in that culture, a fit in the defensive scheme, people that he loves being around, Clemson checks all those boxes. They have to be considered a true contender in this race. He knows he can go in there and be a face of that program, a face of that defense. He's been going there since middle school. He has a great connection with that staff. Mickey Kahn, the safeties coach at Clemson, was the one-time head coach at Grayson High School, where Tyler goes to high school at. So a lot of connections on different levels there. And they did nothing to hurt their chances over the weekend with Tyler Atkinson.
All right, let's go from a Grayson standout to a Buford standout. And this one's a borderline 5-star, number 34 overall, Bryce Perry Wright, one of the most talented edge rushers in the country. He was at Clemson this weekend, and like we said, he's from Georgia, but it seems like the biggest competition for Clemson comes from the state of Alabama, Auburn and Alabama. Is that the way you see it?
Yeah, I think you look at the Texas schools too, Texas A&M, they're Auburn. You cannot sleep on Miami either. I think those are the 5. You mentioned Auburn as well, but I would put all of them behind the Clemson Tigers right now after this official visit. I think they had some momentum going into the visit with Bryce, and I think they added on to that to extend their lead coming out of the visit. Look, he's related to Grady Jarrett, so he's been going to Clemson since Grady played there in Death Valley. has been around that program 10, 15, 20 times. Again, likes the people. Everything is like beating a dead horse. But every time you talk to top recruits about why they commit to Clemson, why they like Clemson, is the culture that Dabo Swinney has created around Death Valley. Just the people want to be there. They see that, they feel that. Bryce says the same thing. And when guys go, a lot of times they don't want to leave, and that's why they end up committing there. And I feel like Bryce and Clemson could end up together when that time comes, and they've made him a priority. He sees a fit. He has spent a lot of time with Nick Eason and Chris Rump during the official visit, and I like Clemson's position. Again, he has OVs left to Miami, Texas, and Texas A&M, but Clemson's definitely setting the pace in this race.
All right, let's go over to Colquitt County High School, where we got running back Jalen Marr. Now, it was kind of uncertain exactly where Jalen Marr was going to visit last weekend. There's some rumors it could be Ohio State, could be somewhere else. He ends up popping up at Clemson. What does that mean for his recruitment?
Look, Clemson does it their way. They have one official visit weekend. If you want in and you want to visit, you got to go on that May 30th weekend, and that's your one shot. They had the one big visit in March 8th. This time it's May 30th. Come or be left behind. That's kind of how they do it. And whether you like it or not, I got a lot of respect for Dabo and the way he does things there. But Jalen Marr does too. They've really come on strong in this race. He visited Clemson for the first time in the spring. It was an eye-opening visit. He almost went back the next week with his mom. Obviously couldn't make that trip, but did make this one this past weekend for the official visit to Clemson. And Clemson continues to contend in this race. The big visit to watch comes at the end of this month on June 20th when he gets to Georgia. They've been perceived as the front runner, the favorite from the beginning of this race. Jalen Marr called Georgia his favorite for many months. He's taken a step back from that now and talking about Miami, Auburn, Clemson, and of course Georgia. Other schools are in the mix too. But look, Clemson's doing a great job of just making him feel at home, feeling comfortable. He loved his first experience at Clemson, probably loved the official visit a little bit more. Again, I think Clemson has to go through Georgia in this race with Jalen Marr, but do not sleep on the Clemson Tigers in this race. He loves the people, the running back room, CJ Spiller, the running back coach, and just, again, the culture and the environment around Clemson reminds him a lot of that environment in Moultrie, Georgia.
All right, let's wrap up this Clemson segment with two more on the defensive line edge. Dre Quinn, defensive lineman Cameron Cody, both from the state of Georgia. Does Clemson have a shot at either of them?
Yeah, I'll start with Cody. Obviously, he's committed. So he's obviously the one commit Clemson has from Georgia right now is Cameron Cody. I mentioned in a piece earlier this week on On3 that they will add more, and Dre Quinn could be one of those. I think Clemson obviously is in a great spot. They don't do a bad job on OV, so most of the time guys come out of there feeling really good about the Tigers. But talking to Dre and people around him in his circle, I think Clemson has made themselves the top school on his list after this official visit. He'll be at Georgia. He'll be at Texas. It's really those three. Notre Dame's been involved. Tennessee's been involved. But right now it's Clemson, Georgia, Texas, the main three schools for Dre Quinn. And again, just being around the people, he could not stop talking about just the culture and how he felt, not so much with the coaches with him, but around the players who just love being a part of that Clemson community. And that could be a place he ends up as well down the road.
All right, Clemson fans, talk to us. The one I'm really interested in is Tyler Atkinson because he's such a tough one to read. But what do you think, Tiger fans? In the end, are the Tigers going to land a 5-star in Atkinson? Let us know. Comment section below. Let's talk Ohio State. There was 5 stars on campus, and the Buckeyes recruiting is buzzing. Let's talk a little 5-star buzz right now with Chad Simmons, Director of Recruiting here at On3. And Chad, there was 3 5-stars on campus this past weekend in Columbus. I kind of felt like heading into the visit that Felix Ojo, Xavier Griffin, Savion Hyder were all prospects that Ohio State maybe needed to make up a little ground, which is great that they had them on campus early in June. So coming out of the visits, what's the intel on where Ohio State stands? Is there one of these 3 that maybe the Buckeyes have a better shot at?
Yeah, coming out, I think they made the biggest move and maybe the biggest impression with Xavier Griffin, five-star linebacker, former USC commit from Gainesville, Georgia, getting him on campus and really laying out the plan for how he would fit in from Coach Laurinaitis to the new defensive scheme under Matt Patricia to kind of how they would use him, move him around, and how he could excel, in that scheme at a national power like Ohio State. So for me, look, going into this OV this time a week ago, the buzz was around one Alabama, and if there was a 1B, it would have been Texas. Now,
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State must put themselves in that conversation with the two schools. Griffin will visit the next 2 weeks, Alabama this weekend, Texas on June 13th. So Ohio State made a very big, very positive, move with Xavier Griffin. I think they kind of basically kept the same level with a guy like Felix Ojo. Didn't do anything bad by any means. He had a great time. They're quote unquote very high on his list after this official visit, but we felt that way going into the visit as well. We think Texas is going to be hard to beat. For Felix Ojo, he's a five-star O tackle in the Lone Star State. He'll be in Austin on June 13th, like Xavier Griffin. And we still think they are the front runner, but we think their biggest competition is Ohio State. So they did a great job over the weekend there with Savion Hyder. Obviously, he's probably the top running back on many boards across the country. Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia, Tennessee. They're the four schools involved. I heard some very positive buzz about a month and a half ago around Ohio State and Savion Hyder. And they're definitely considered, I think, a top three school
Mm-hmm.
right now coming out of this visit. Things went well. We're still hearing a little bit more, though, about Michigan and Tennessee with Savion Hyder.
Nice. Well, that's why they have the visits. You can make up ground. That's what happens. All right. Speaking of visits, this weekend, Ohio State has some big ones coming up. And let's start with Bishop Gorman safety Jet Washington. This is a big recruitment. How do you see it? How do you see his recruitment before the visit?
This is a big visit for Ohio State if they want to be a major player in this race. Look, he's probably going to commit sometime in July. He hasn't been to Ohio State since this time a year ago. So they haven't had him on campus anytime recently. They were somewhat maybe of a surprise to get an official visit from Jet. He was at Alabama this past weekend for his first official visit. The Crimson Tide set the bar, like always, extremely high. We
Mm-hmm.
like Alabama and Oregon as the top two. I might give a slight edge to Oregon coming out of the spring visits. Bama did a great job over the weekend. We'll see how things play out the next few weeks. But this is a big visit for Jet Washington and Ohio State because they haven't seen each other in roughly a year. So he has some questions for Ohio State. He wants to see the plan they have for him and how he would fit into their defensive scheme and just learn more about the program and the people in the program. Look, they're a top program. He knows about them from winning the national championship, how they put guys into the NFL and things like that. But getting that one-on-one conversation with Ryan Day, Matt Patricia, Tim Walton, those guys, that's going to be a key part if they make a move this weekend for Jet Washington.
Yeah. Now, when we talk about Jalen Lott, the athlete out of Texas, top 5 athlete out of Texas, I tend to think LSU, Texas Longhorns in this recruitment, but this coming weekend, it's going to be a visit to Ohio State. Do the Buckeyes have a shot here?
I mean, look, he's visiting, so they have a shot. I mean, look, Ohio State is what many call wide receiver U, and that's that they put guys into the league, they develop guys. I mean, Jalen's an elite playmaker. Um, you mentioned LSU. He was there this past
Mm-hmm.
weekend. Obviously, you mentioned Texas. That's an in-state program. He'll be there later on this month. His mom and dad played sports at the University of Texas, so those bloodlines run pretty deep there with the Texas Longhorns. We see Oregon as a major player in this race still as well. But Ohio State, they're a school on the list. He'll spend 48 hours there in Columbus this weekend. They'll look like they did with Xavier Griffin this past weekend to maybe sneak up on some people and make a big move this weekend with Jalen Lott.
All right. So we've been mentioning names that kind of sound like long shots, but the next one I'm going to ask you about sounds like Ohio State's to lose. I'm talking about running back Favor Aki. He is also expected in this weekend, top 200 prospect overall. Do you maybe have him on commit watch this weekend?
Took the words out of my mouth, Josh. Commitment watch for sure. Look, we've been having him on commitment watch for much of the spring. Look, Miami was up there at one point as the front runner. Look, Ohio State's like 15 minutes from home.
Yeah.
That's his dream school. He can represent what he says the city, the hometown hero. He loves Coach Lachlan, the running backs coach at Ohio State. Ike is Ohio State's to lose, and I don't think they lose him. I think whether he commits this weekend or later on this summer, Ohio State's in a great position to land Ike, a kid in their backyard, a guy they've really gone hard after over the last couple of months. He's been there numerous times. His family likes the people there. Obviously, the family loves the idea of being able to see him play pretty much week in and week out at Ohio State. So, look, they're in a great spot for Ike, and I'd be surprised if that changed coming out of this weekend.
All right, Ohio State fans, how you feeling about last weekend? How do you feel about this weekend? Who do you think is the most important recruit heading to campus? Let us know. Comment section below. Let's talk some Georgia Bulldog recruiting. The number 5 ranked class in the country got a big boost last night. DB Justice Fitzpatrick committed. Number 65 overall. He is now the second highest commitment, only behind Jared Curtis on that Georgia commit list. So Chad Simmons, director of recruiting here at On 3. How did Georgia win it?
Relationships. It's that simple. Like I've been covering Justice for maybe year and a half, 2 years now, and spent some time with him in the spring down at St. Thomas Aquinas, just him and I after track practice. And we just sat there and talked. He talked about just relationships, where he felt best about going to, not even so much about development, but just being around the right people that want the right things for him. And then the second part of that, he told me, was where his family fits him and really them the best. And it goes that for me, since that moment, I've been painting the picture of this is going to come down to Miami, the school in his backyard, with Mario Cristobal, who at the time his brother Minkah Fitzpatrick played at Alabama. Mario was on that staff, and the family knows that head coach at Miami. And then Kirby Smart, who recruited Minkah Fitzpatrick to Alabama, coached him in the secondary, was a defensive coordinator, and is now the head coach at Georgia because of those connections and those relationships, the comfortability. Trust is everything for the Fitzpatrick family. Even Minkah went on some visits with Justice this spring to ask the hard questions to Kirby Smart, to Mario Cristobal. Is it the right fit for my brother? Was Minkah's, in his mind? And they got all the questions answered. I talked to you. I was texting you all weekend about talking about Justice Fitzpatrick for this feature, because I was hearing some buzz that Georgia made a pretty big move here in this race. Obviously, he committed a little bit sooner than I think many of us thought he would. But again, it goes back to relationships and trust with Kirby Smart and that staff at Georgia.
All right. As I said, number 5 ranked class in America, but the Dogs are not done. Chad, who's trending toward Georgia now?
No, as my buddy Rusty would say, a lot of meat still on that bone there at Georgia in Athens. And talking about guys specifically, on the OVs this past weekend, you have to start with elite tight end Caden Prothro. I mean, look, over the weekend, Georgia got some tough news that Mark Bowman goes to USC, will not take that official visit to Georgia on June 13th. With or without Bowman, Georgia wanted Caden Prothro in this class, and I think they have a very good shot to get him. He knows he is the priority at that position. He loves Coach Todd Hartley. You can ever really bet against Todd Hartley. The room he's put together and the tight ends he's produced at Georgia. I like Georgia's position there. Another in-state kid, Kamari Brooks, right there in the backyard at North Oconee. He's been to Georgia over 15 times, has connections to the program as well. Look, Alabama is in this for real with Brooks as well. He'll be in Tuscaloosa this weekend. To me, that's a huge visit for him in Alabama. Can they swing some momentum away from Georgia? Right now, I like where Georgia sits for Kamari Brooks. Staying in-state real quick, Craig Dandridge, in-state playmaker, wide receiver, Cambridge High School, Coley's put a lot of time into this recruitment, saw him in the spring. They had a great official visit over the weekend. He'll be at Georgia Tech this weekend. That's their biggest competition right now. I like Georgia's position for Craig Dandridge as well. Last one I'll touch on is a massive offensive lineman. We know Georgia loves those big bodies up front. Desmond Green from South Carolina, around 6'5", 350 pounds. Big kid that's high on Georgia's board. We like Georgia's position going into the OV. We like it even more coming out of the OV. South Carolina looks to be the biggest competition. He plans to take OVs, but right now, Georgia, like you said, they're 5 right now. They'll likely end up higher than that, and I could see multiple guys I just mentioned in this class when all comes and said and done.
Yeah, more commitments are coming. Georgia fans, talk to us. Who do you think is going to be the next big commitment for the Dogs? Let us know. Comment section below.